All right. Well, welcome to Higher Education, the podcast that explores career development in public education. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Sergo, and in each episode, we explore different aspects of career development, interview experts, and share practical advice. Today, we'll be exploring mentorship and networking. I'm really excited about our January topic for higher education. I think this will be extremely helpful to many of our listeners. Whether you are a classroom teacher, an aspiring leader, a support professional, or even a seasoned administrator, building meaningful connections and learning from experienced mentors can open doors, spark innovation, and create pathways to success. To guide us through this subject, we have two wonderful guests with us today. First, we have Amy Struntz. Amy is in her 28th year in Frederick County Public Schools. She's held a variety of roles in her career here, both as an elementary classroom teacher, a literacy specialist, and has been in our equity and organizational development unit working on professional learning. She's been a teacher specialist, a coordinator, and is now our supervisor. We also have Ryan Hench with us today. Ryan is in his 33rd year in public education. He spent 13 years in Washington County and has been in Frederick County for the past 20 years. He's an art educator, a school support teacher. He's even been both an assistant principal and a principal. And he is currently working again as an art teacher. He also is very proud of his role as the elementary visual performing arts master teacher. And I'm excited to have both Amy and Ryan with us today. Before we dive into our topic, I'd love to have both of our guests introduce themselves to you a little bit. Amy, can you tell us a little bit more about your fast facts and introduce yourself and your perspective on today's topic, which is mentorship and networking?
Yes, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Again, my name is Amy Struntz, and I serve as Supervisor of Induction and Professional Learning in Frederick County Public Schools. Throughout my career, I've held many different roles, as Dr. Sergo explained. And in each of those roles, I feel as though I had an opportunity to serve as a mentor and hone my skills in mentoring. As a classroom teacher, I mentored many pre-service interns as they were developing into, many of them, FCPS teachers. As a literacy specialist, I had the opportunity to mentor experienced teachers and new hires alike. And then when I moved into the teacher specialist role, one of my responsibilities was to lead the systemic mentoring program here. And so in that role, I learned a great deal. I had opportunities to go to trainings with the New Teacher Center and opportunities to learn with professional learning organization and just to hone those skills. And much of what I learned from those opportunities has become the foundation of our Frederick County mentoring program that we have here today. And, one of the things that I really am excited to talk about today is the importance that mentoring can play in retaining our teachers. It is an important reason why teachers choose to stay in a system when they feel that they have the opportunity to be mentored and the opportunity to be supported as they are learning and developing in their career.
Well, we're so grateful to have you here. You certainly have a wide range of expertise and experience in this topic. Ryan, let's unlock your fast facts as well. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. I am so fortunate to be one of the art teachers at Middletown Elementary, where I teach grades 3, 4, 5, and the Expressions program. I have a pretty long and varied resume, and in my time in both classroom and admin roles, I will say that mentorship has been something that I've cherished as a person who's been able to mentor both student interns, admin interns, teachers at all levels of their careers. But I guess the other part of it for me has been, I feel like I've just come into contact with so many amazing educators who've been willing to support me, who've taken me under their wing, who have mentored me as a teacher or as a young administrator. And then in 2019, when I came back into Frederick County as an art educator again, I happened to get back involved with the Educator Effectiveness Academy, and was amazed at how it had developed. Now, I first went through in 1992 when it was called the New Teacher Workshop, and the folks at the LLC, the professional learning they provide and the support they provide to the new teachers that I accessed, I think at the time I was probably in year 28, but coming back into the classroom, made me hungry to keep learning as an educator, and then also got me interested in taking on a role mentoring folks so that they could have the opportunities that I had as I reinvented my career in year 28.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys are going to both give such insight to our audience about not only what it takes to be a mentor, but also sort of what it means to be mentored. Because all good mentors have also been mentees. And both of you shared so eloquently your experience on both ends. So let's dive in today. The first thing we're going to really talk about is explore the positive effects of mentorship. Why is this even something districts invest in and we cultivate and sort of make sure is in place for our employees? Mentorship sometimes is often limited to being thought about as a professional development experience. And it goes far beyond this idea of promotions or job titles. It's really about building trust and confidence in our relationships and our sense of self in an organization. Amy, in your experience, what are some of the most significant positive outcomes that you've seen from strong mentorship relationships?
Yeah, when I was thinking about this question, I'm thinking, in three realms, right? As the mentee, that person gets the opportunity to improve their skills, improve their instructional skills. They get more professional growth and professional growth opportunities. Being part of that relationships helps improve their confidence, right? They're feeling supported. They're being given feedback on a constant basis. You're giving them emotional support, a place to feel safe when they want to get some stress out or when they're uncertain about things, which is really important. In most mentee-mentor relationships, there's a confidentiality aspect, which is really important. And it really helps an individual adapt to their current environment. And feel that sense of belonging and feel a part of the culture, which we know is really important in development. And then on the side of the mentor, I think Ryan mentioned this a little bit, it kind of gives you a little bit of personal fulfillment, right? It gives you a renewed passion for what you've always done because you really stop and pause and think about the joy that brought you into teaching and the joy in what you do. And it also gives you the opportunity to reflect and hone your own skills, right? Because when you have to stop and explain what you're doing and why you're doing it with an individual, um, it really helps you reflect on what you're doing and are you doing the best job for your students or are you doing the best you can do? And then also leadership development. For the mentor, it's giving them the opportunity to use mentoring skills, to dabble with coaching and develop those leadership skills. And then the third thing that I think about is the outcome for the system, right? When you have a strong mentoring program or opportunities for mentorship, again, it increases the retention of our teachers because they feel supported, they feel seen and heard. Creates a stronger culture and climate within the system and starts to build that leadership pipeline. So definitely very positive outcomes when you have a strong mentoring program.
That's such great examples, and I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about some of those sort of pieces that you just pulled out. Before we do, I'd love to hear from Ryan. Ryan, how have you seen mentorship contribute to a positive school climate and a culture, sort of better outcomes for both mentors and mentees, as Amy described?
It's interesting when you talk about positive school culture. One of the things I think that's critical is growing trust. I'm fortunate to be at Middletown Elementary, where you've got a great history and tradition of folks who have been here and in the community for quite a while. And then, as a newer person in the community, you want to make sure that you're building trust with your colleagues and with families. And mentorship gives you that opportunity, knowing that you can have someone who you are working with to build their craft, to build their skills, to help them develop the art and science of pedagogy, of instruction, of teaching and learning. But then also you can lean on people the same way. And that trust, I think, across a school, first of all, it helps grow those relationships between colleagues and quickly, which I think is really important nowadays. With a more mobile teaching force, we want people to put down roots. We want people, as Amy said, to think about staying with Frederick County Public Schools for the entirety of their career. We want to retain teachers, not just to make sure that they have a long career in education, but also so that they're staying with FCPS. And so by being a mentor in your school, you're investing yourself in making sure that folks feel like they have a place and that trust and that confidence in their colleagues. I think when it comes to the outcomes for mentors and mentees, it's very symbiotic. I feel like an experience I had this summer as I first got my group up and flying. They came over to Middletown, And we were supposed to take a walk through, like from the very moment, what it would be like if you were a student walking into my room for the first time, and kind of taking them through an entire 40 to 45 minute period. I tell you what, that made me like really think about the metacognitive side of teaching. All of those things that over the years you start to do sort of naturally and as second nature, really breaking them apart and starting to look at what is really best for kids, what's best for my kids, and then how can I help transfer that knowledge so that someone else can take it and adapt it and use it in their own situation. So it's been a very healthy thing for me as an educator. And as I get feedback from my mentees, it's been interesting because some of them have said, I straight up adopted what you're doing in your classroom. And then other ones have said, oh, I kind of like what you did, but this is the way I'm trying it at my school because my situation is a little different. My students are different. My community is different. And they've come up with some things and taught me some things as well now that I'm kind of chomping at the bit. Next year or next semester, this is what I might want to try with my guys. So it's growth for both sides. And I think that's really the positive outcome for both them and for the mentor.
That's such a great segue into this sort of segment I want us to dig into, which is defining mentorship. I remember a few years ago, there was a podcast that I listened to by Adam Grant that was called The Three Myths of Mentorship. And one of the things that one of the guests talked about was this idea of when you're defining who you want as a mentor, when you're seeking mentorship, you shouldn't always necessarily look for the biggest rock star, right? It's not always about like who's ever highest in the organization or someone who has the job that you want. And this idea that you can learn in a reciprocal fashion from all kinds of people. In some ways, research says that the more successful someone is, the harder time they have being a mentor because they don't understand necessarily or are too distant from the person who is just starting out. And I think sometimes mentorship can be confused with coaching or being a role model. And sometimes we think those are the people that should be our mentors. But, there is some overlap, I would acknowledge, of course, but mentorship is unique. And I love that you both really talked about it's not just about being available to help or giving someone your opinion or just checking in with someone. Hey, I'm your mentor. How you doing this week? I'm doing my check-in. It has sort of a somewhat formal, but yet not perhaps always explicitly stated set of rules and procedures that both the mentor and the mentee have to understand. So Ryan, I'd love to go back to you and sort of start with you this time, which is, how would you define mentorship in practical terms? Like, what does it look like and feel like in a school setting?
It's interesting. You talked about that availability piece, and there is that. I mean, my mentees, I think I have 9 that I'm working with this year. They need to feel confident they can contact me at any time, ask me any question, and know that I'll be there for them either in that school day or within 24 hours. But the other side of it, when you talk about developing that mentor-mentee relationship, to me, it looks like you're taking the needs of your mentees into account, right? We talk about, stakeholder buy-in. If my program, so to speak, and, air quotes, is to shovel knowledge into people and hope that they become the best teachers they can become, I think I'm destined to fail. And I'm also helping them not achieve at their highest. What I really need to do is be willing to listen, hear their feedback, and hear their needs at the point in time that we're in this first school year or third school year. But then also keep in mind some of the things that Amy mentioned earlier. There are the needs of your students and what good quality instruction is going to look like and sound like and feel like no matter where you are in this county. Along with systemic initiatives. There are things that we have expectations of for high levels of success for our students and for community engagement and involvement that we can't push to the wayside. We don't want to do that because that kind of gets us away from our mission, which is achievement for all students all the time. I think for me as a mentor, one of the things that mentorship looks like and feels like in the school setting is making sure we're setting achievable, attainable goals. You have to have some short-term wins, no matter whether you're the 33-year veteran like myself, or maybe you're that, it's your second week of school and you're 22 years old and you just got your degree and you're standing in front of 30 students and you're trying to figure out what to do. You have to have a few short-term achievable wins, and then you have to plan for success. We talk at my house a lot with my kids about the idea of it's better to plan for successes than planning to avoid failures. And when you set short-term goals, maybe it's something you want to achieve this week. Maybe it's something you're trying to get, under your belt this month or this quarter or in 6 months or the school year. As you set that sort of continuum of goals, you're kind of doing what we do as teachers all the time. You're chunking the knowledge and the information to make it more manageable. And I think that, in a school setting, making sure people have some wins early on so that they're able to take some of the different skills that they're bringing to the table. Because I tell you what, the quality of candidates that I got to work with this year is amazing. I mean, just the skill sets that they bring to the table. Making sure that they can take that and utilize it so that they're able to create win-wins for them and for their students and their schools, I think is really what mentorship should look like in the school setting.
I love what you said about sort of this idea of taking the mentee's needs into consideration. They say the worst kind of mentor is if you have a Yoda, they call them, like a Yoda mentor, which is, I'm just going to sit here on my pedestal and I'm going to give you my opinion. And so, I think the purpose of mentoring is not necessarily to get the advice of your mentor, but to seek their perspective. And so I love this idea you talked about around perspective taking and how important that is in that relationship. And so it again digs into this difference between a mentor and a coach or a role model and how those are different. Amy, what in your mind distinguishes a mentor from a coach and a role model?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to kind of unpack that a little bit because I think sometimes we use coaching and mentoring synonymously. And there's definitely some overlap, but there are also definitely some differences, right? When I think of coaching, take a sports coach, for example, you are specifically looking at a targeted set of skills, a targeted behavior that you're trying to hone. So, and it's usually a shorter term relationship. You get in, you focus on that skill, and then you're out and you're moving on to something else, right? So, and it's oftentimes driven by you, the coach. And so when mentoring, it's a little bit more of a holistic approach. So when you're thinking about mentoring, you want to focus on long-term goals, long-term aspirations for the mentee and help them through questioning, through listening, through guidance, kind of achieve those goals and unpack them and kind of discover them a little bit. It's more focused on career development, professional growth, even dabbling in the well-being and that balance of work and home life. And so that's a little bit different than the shorter term specificness of coaching, right? There may be some of that, but I think it's a little bit broader. And I also want to tap into something that both you and Ryan were talking about in terms of it's not the Yoda effect. It's not that you are the expert on all things. Many times our mentees, may not have all the answers, right? It's about knowing the questions to ask of the mentee to help them kind of problem solve on their own. Oftentimes they have the answers within. They just need someone to ask them the right questions to draw them out or to help them have the confidence to believe in what they were first thinking. And I think sometimes that's the skill or the art of mentoring, right? Of knowing what are those questions to ask, when is the right time to ask those questions, and how do we pull that information and help build the confidence in our mentees to have that to move forward.
I love what you said here about this idea of I'm not just telling you what I think, because a lot of mentors, and I think I would include all three of us in this, we have a lot of experience and we've lived through a lot of professional experiences, not only sort of just life. And I think what you talked about is a really good mentor doesn't just tell you what I would do based on my experience, but helps you make meaning and crystallize what you should do based on your experience. And I think that idea of sort of crystallizing lessons from your experience is a really important part of that. So let's sort of shift gears a little bit and get into sort of finding a mentor, right? So, that can feel daunting. It's not always about formal programs, although of course those are important and essential, but, those tend to assign mentors. So if you're looking for a mentor in a more informal way, it's about really finding those meaningful connections. I know in my experience, I've been asked to mentor people, but I've also been told by people that I'm their mentor without ever necessarily having agreed to that relationship or sort of formally, sort of signed up for that. And so, I've also had people who I would tell you they are my mentors, but they may not know that, right? They may not necessarily, we may not be in that formal thing. So, it's about figuring out what that connection is, and whether or not you label it as mentor and mentee, I think is probably up for discussion. But Amy, let's start with you this time. What advice would you give to someone who is looking to identify or approach a potential mentor?
I mean, I think I would start with thinking about what is it that you want out of the relationship? What is it that you want to achieve as a result of the mentorship, right? So, not just because someone works next to you or is your next door neighbor or whatever, or you have a great rapport with them, doesn't necessarily mean they are going to be the best mentor. You want someone who has similar values. So I would be looking for someone with similar values to me. I would also be looking for someone who is a good listener, who displays that active listening that isn't just listening to respond, but is listening to understand and to help assist me moving forward. Look for someone who's an effective communicator. Look for someone who's supportive and patient and has the time, right? Again, just because someone could be a good mentor doesn't necessarily mean they have the time or the disposition or the willingness or desire to take what's needed to help you improve. So I think there's some sort of joint expectations that need to be set together, and you need to move forward in that relationship together.
That's such a great example of how do you sort of really, it should be a two-way relationship. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it's not just you have something to gain from the mentor. There has to be sort of that reciprocity. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but first I want to go over to Ryan and say, Ryan, as you're looking at it from your perspectives, are there systems or opportunities in our schools that you think employees might overlook when seeking mentorship?
I feel like our mentoring program, like that we have formally in the system, is very well advertised and very well accessed. And it's as I said earlier, it's incredibly well developed. At year 28, I was learning things about instruction that I could have come in here and thought I knew it all, but instead I've met some really amazing people at the LLC, and started to pick up new knowledge and new practices. And while there are the formal systems in place, I feel like we have so much homegrown talent in each school, and that for lack of a better term, cross pollination is really easy to achieve. You do have to take into account things that Amy was talking about. Just because someone has that knowledge and seems like they'd be a great mentor doesn't necessarily mean that they want to be a mentor at this moment in time right now. But I do feel like it's important to look towards your teammates and your colleagues, to look towards your admin team. If they're not the people that you're looking at as a potential mentor, they probably know a person who could help you level up your game. Because I think at any point in time in our careers as educators, that's what most of us are looking to do. How are we going to achieve the next level? Because in the end, if I level up my teaching game, the benefit spills over into here at Middletown, my 300 plus students, and their families and the community. It's as simple as, like, just a simple example. I feel like I'm pretty well versed using Schoology. However, I know that if I have a question about it, if I don't know what to do, I know that every school has a Schoology ambassador. And I know my Schoology ambassador here really well. As a matter of fact, she's a person I taught in third grade. And I go to her with questions all the time. And if she doesn't know the answer, because she's incredibly well versed in using Schoology and developing things, she knows where I can kick that question. And that's something that I think that we sometimes get away from, because we are looking for the big win. You know what? I love the big win myself. But as I said earlier, a few small ones here and there, and that could be the person who's next door to you. That could be a person with whom you're striking up a long-term mentoring relationship. It could be someone that's interning with you. It could be someone that you're going to intern with, or in a less formal sense, someone who you're kind of going to follow and look at their practice and reflect on their practice and have conversations with them. But as I said, there's so much homegrown talent around us, and I think it'd be a shame if we ignored that, because it's very easy for your 7.5 hours a day in school to be in your box, and to be kind of run around by the tyranny of the urgent, which is, what do my kids need right now? Oh my gosh, I got to get some grades in Schoology. I've got to go hit the copier. I've got to cut some paper. I've got to, for me, get my paint ready, have my ceramics ready, have thinking bigger picture and looking at teammates and colleagues and admin in your own building, or in buildings that you've taught in before, folks that you can lean on and seek out advice and counsel from, so that you can level yourself up.
Yeah, and I love what you said about sort of the idea of looking in unexpected places. Don't look in what you think is the obvious place, right? And don't pick a mentor just because of the job title they have. Be very clear about what it is you want to get out of the relationship. And the best mentor-mentee relationships are reciprocal. And so for our sort of last segment here before we wrap up, we have to really be clear that if you are approaching someone or you're looking for a mentor or you're serving as a mentor to mentees, that both of you should grow from that relationship. And so you can't just attach yourself to the leader in your school, office, department, or organization, or someone who, the worst case scenario is you say you just want to be able to say they're your mentor, and you think by having that name attachment you will have some sort of career growth. There has to be an understanding by both parties that this is a reflective and reciprocal relationship. And I loved how, Ryan, you gave so many examples of how you've grown from those relationships, even from people who are less experienced than you. So, Amy, I'd love to sort of give you the last question on this topic, which is, what do you recommend? How can both mentors and mentees ensure that that relationship remains reciprocal and balanced?
Well, you mentioned the word clear a couple times. And so that made me think of, the Brene Brown quote, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And I think that a lot of assumptions can be made when entering into a relationship, like a mentee-mentor relationship. But if we don't build clear expectations on both parties, then a lot of assumptions will be made and then not fulfilled by the other person's thoughts. So thinking about creating clear norms for relationships. How do we enter into each of our meetings? What are the expectations for each of us? And communicating those expectations. And then having opportunities when maybe they're not being met to come back and circle back to that and say, okay, here's what I was expecting and this isn't happening. How can we, right? And so I think in order to have those conversations, it builds on relationships and trust. And I think trust is extremely important in a mentee-mentor relationship. So finding opportunities to build in those clear and kind expectations so that each party knows what's expected and what's the outcome of the relationship, building trust with one another, building that relationship through active listening, through maintaining confidentiality. If you breach trust with somebody, it's very hard to get back, right? And so making sure that we do that. And then the other thing is keeping those promises, right? If you say that you're going to do something, if you're going to support, value the time of the other individual on both sides, and making sure that you are valuing each other's time, because time is a precious commodity in our career. And I think that you can hear that everywhere you go, that there's not enough time, there's not enough time. So making sure that the time is well spent and that you're valuing one another's time on both sides.
And you talked a little bit about something we haven't dug into as much. So I'd love for Ryan to pick this part up, which is like sort of some of the pitfalls, right? So you can somehow, with all good intentions, let's say you've got your mentor, you've got your norms, and you start to engage in it, but perhaps that relationship is one-sided or it's just not working. Ryan, in your perspective, what are some red flags that a mentorship relationship might be one-sided? And it could be either to the benefit or the detriment of either party. What's been your reflection on that?
It's interesting. I find that the Yoda syndrome is easy to fall into. When you first become a master teacher, at least when I became one, I was so excited because I felt like I have so much to be able to share and give. And then I think the first day we met at Tuscarora High as a team, I found myself feeling like I was talking nonstop, and had part of it was probably nerves, and part of it was probably because, as I said, I felt like I had so much I had to give, and there were time pressures. And as I looked across the group, I realized that I probably needed to kind of go back to one of Covey's old sayings, which was seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I really needed to start to back out of this idea that I was the giver and that the mentees were going to be the receivers or the recipients of some kind of, amazing knowledge about teaching that I was going to give them, because that's not what a mentor is all about. And I think as a potential red flag in relationships between mentors and mentees, if you kind of end up in that I give, you receive, you end up in a relationship that's sort of subservient and that isn't isn't something, as I said earlier, that doesn't help you as a mentor to become more metacognitive about your practices. I feel like it's a sign that I might be doing something right with my mentees if I'm learning as much from them as I hope they're learning from me. And I think that's a big piece of the puzzle in terms of judging whether or not the relationship is on the right track, and knowing also that, I mean, at times in any relationship you have bumps. Everybody brings baggage to a relationship. We all have our experiences, our past experiences, educators, and as humans, and you have to be aware of that. And as a mentor, you have to be very sensitive to understanding the needs of your mentees and making sure that you're not, going to be that sage on the stage, that you're not going to fill the silence. That's a really important one as well. I'm working hard on, as a mentor, learning to make sure that when things get quiet, that I'm okay with it, because it means people are either processing or they're waiting for me to fill the silence. And as a mentor, it's important that I honor the fact that everyone has something to give in the relationship, and that no matter what, we're learning from each other as much as they are, hopefully, from me.
Yeah, what you reminded me of is this importance of thinking with some degree of innovation around mentoring. I'm reminded of this story I read about Patrice Gordon, who at the time was working for Virgin Atlantic, and the CEO had asked for her to set up a reverse mentoring program where the executives were being mentored by the frontline sort of airline employees. And so I think it's also this idea of, sort of at its core, mentoring is about learning and about making meaning of our experiences. And that doesn't have to be sort of top down in a traditional sense. It can be bottom up. And so also, if you're finding yourself always being the mentor and you are looking to be, become a mentee once again, and you're advanced in your career or perhaps advanced in the organization, there are the opportunities to be mentored by the people who are in that lived experience that you are there to care for. And so I think you've offered some really important reflections in that regard. Well, we are unfortunately getting to the end of the show today, and I want to, of course, take an opportunity to thank our guests for joining us, Amy and Ryan. You both have such powerful insights and experiences with mentoring and networking. And I know that this is a really important topic to our employees because this is so crucial in our careers and in life. It's not a surprise that 90% of Fortune 500 companies invest in mentoring programs. So they matter and they work, and we want to make sure that whether it's a formal program or an informal relationship, that it supports every individual in the organization. So our final sort of ticket to leave for both of you, if you could offer one piece of advice to someone aiming to level up in their chosen field or career or passion, what would it be? And this time, Amy, we'll start with you.
All right. So I think it would be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself about the gaps that you have in your current knowledge, right? And then be open to learning and finding opportunities to fill in those gaps so that you can level up. And maybe one of those opportunities is seeking out a mentor for yourself, right? And seeing mentoring and mentorship and networking as opportunity for growth and self-betterment. And again, just being open and honest with yourself about where you need to fill in those gaps of knowledge. We all have them, right? So identify them, have others help you identify them, and then seek out whatever you need to kind of fill in those gaps to level up.
Love that. That's fantastic. So Ryan, what do you think? What would be your piece of advice to someone if they're looking to level up?
I would say, yeah, go find your squad. Find like-minded, success-oriented people to run with. I love what Amy said about finding people who help fill those gaps. I think successful relationships come when we find that yin to our yang. You know what I mean? I think it's also, again, I mentioned this earlier, if you find your squad, you find that team of people who helps lift you up, you're going to be in that process of planning for success rather than scrambling to avoid failure. And that's something that you have to think about every day, because your kids deserve the best. Every time they walk into your classroom, they deserve 100% of the best you can give. FCPS has amazing resources. People who are looking to support growth, they're looking to give opportunities, they're looking to share. I think if you need a mentor, ask your teammates, ask your colleagues, ask your admin, ask a friend. They probably have some experience in finding a good match, and they might be able to suggest that great match for you so that you can find the next level of support and then level your game up after you access it.
Such great advice. It reminds me of the quote that says, "Tell me with whom you associate, and I will tell you who you are." And that idea of really thinking about who you want to surround yourself with and sort of what you want to grow from. So, thank you both for sharing your perspective on that question, and of course, all of the other questions on today's show. That wraps up today's episode of Higher Education. We hope you found our exploration of mentoring and networking really helpful and meaningful, and maybe you found a few bits of advice and strategies to add to your toolkit. Until then, we'll be joining you next month with another episode. We hope that you will take some time to listen to our podcast, look at our quick bites online, and level up in your career. Thanks so much, and don't forget to share this podcast.